The main areas of investigation which RMI engages in today are, broadly speaking, asset search, where our clients substantially are banks, creditors, our shareholders who are in dispute with other shareholders, and secondarily then the whole area of corporate fraud investigation. That is a big area of demand for RMI at this time. Typically when we receive instructions with regards to asset search, we'll be appointed quite often in standard and complex cases by the client's legal advisors. And in those instances we will search national and international public source databases. We will compile what we call a single view of directorships, of assets, of business associates, of suppliers, to the extent possible of senior people involved with the subjects of our investigations. We will report back to the client and confirm and verify what we call the green list of information. And quite often, in the first instance, what the client will see in that green list will represent information which is both previously known, but quite often as well information that wasn't previously known. Depending on the results of that phase of investigation, we quite often then will go into what we call phase one, pursuing particular and definite lines of inquiry. When we commence a phase one investigation, quite often it's with a view to closing down gaps in information which have been identified in our previous phase of work, or to try and evidence some intelligence which we have received with regards to assets. In the current climate, in complex cases in particular, where debtors, delinquent debtors, as opposed to other people who've just fallen on hard times, quite often people will have placed assets beyond use in physical locations, behind trust funds and so forth. Quite often in those cases we can use confidential sources to help confirm the belief that the original intention wasn't tax planning, but in fact to place assets beyond the reach of legitimate creditors. The culmination of all of this is the production of information which will assist the client in their negotiations, or alternatively to assist the client in adopting whatever they believe is the appropriate litigation strategy or litigation tactics indeed. Fraud is always prevalent during times of recession. Fraud, broadly speaking, can fall into two categories in this day and age. Obviously, the traditional sense or understanding of fraud is theft of money, from expenses through to supplier fraud and so forth. But these days, where we have large numbers of people being made redundant and so forth, what you will find is that people will harvest sensitive company information leading up to the time they believe they're going to be let go. And quite often that information is harvested for, let's say, the rainy day at least, or potentially for sale to suppliers, to competitors, or maybe if that employee perceives an opportunity in setting up business themselves. The traditional view of fraud in the financial area still stands. These days, because we can move money globally, instantly, digitally, fraud has become very complex. You need to work with forensic accountants. You need to be able to employ and deploy digital forensic experts. But these days, companies need to realize that it is easier for people to steal information than to steal money. And quite often, that is where the biggest single losses are experienced. The people required to conduct complex financial investigations are people who come from, broadly speaking, police forces, army intelligence, secondarily, forensic accountants, and thirdly, and more importantly these days, people who are qualified and experienced in the conduct of digital forensic investigations. Those three capabilities exist within RMI, both in Ireland and also overseas. Quite often we will partner with other organisations, but we also have extensive experience now of deploying people to other jurisdictions to address both the investigative requirements, the forensic accounting requirements, and also the digital forensic investigation.